welcome back to another episode of Birding by Rail, a series where I try to get to the best birding hotspot in every state via transit. In today's episode, we will be visiting the state of New Hampshire.
Live free or die!
Odiorne Point State Park is New Hampshire's #1 birding hotspot, with 312 species at the time of recording this video. The state park is about 135 acres in size and is a few miles south of Portsmouth, New Hampshire. In the winter months, this is an especially good place to look for loons, eiders, grebes, and ducks, which is what inspired me to go in the month of December. Getting to Odiorne Point State Park from Providence was quite the adventure. Since I decided to do this as a day trip, this meant catching the earliest MBTA train from Providence at 5:15 a.m., so I could catch the earliest Downeaster train to New Hampshire at 8:50 a.m. from Boston North Station. Once aboard, it was a pretty standard trip to Boston. Since it was well before sunrise, there wasn't any scenery, just a dark void to stare out into. If you're on a train that terminates in South Station, but you need to get to North Station, there are many different ways you can do it. One of the most annoying parts of this journey was that the schedules of each train that I had to take didn't line up very well. So I found myself having multiple layovers of 2 hours or more. If you're attempting to do this for yourself, I suggest setting some money aside to go out to eat or see some local attractions while you wait. Fortunately for me, I'm into trains, so I didn't have to wait very long for something interesting to arrive. To get to Odiorne, I took the Downeaster to Dover, New Hampshire. For the most part, the scenery isn't anything spectacular, especially while you're in Massachusetts. Once you get into New Hampshire, you get some nice wetlands and mature forests, which are a nice change in scenery. Since Odiorne is about 20 miles away from Dover, I hopped on a coast bus that brought me to Portsmouth for $1.50. For my purposes, I found Coast Bus to be reliable and comfortable. I especially liked their seats, which were significantly more comfortable than the buses I ride back home. The biggest downside to Coast Bus was a complete lack of Sunday service, and only 1-hour frequencies for the bus route I was taking. Once the bus drops you off in downtown Portsmouth, there is still about 3.5 miles until you get to Odiorne Point. As far as I can tell, there is no public transit that will take you any closer, so you either have to walk or bike. On the bright side, for most of the way down there's a sidewalk. About an hour and 10 minutes and 3.5 miles later, I arrived. When I first started unpacking my binoculars, scope, and camera, someone asked me what I was doing. When I told them I was birding, they chuckled and told me that I'd be lucky if I saw more than a few robins. Let's see if we can do any better than that. In addition to having some decent birding, Odiorne was overall just a nice place to walk around. I spent about 2 hours there, and saw about 30 species of birds. You can find an eBird checklist for everything I saw in the description of this video. For me personally, the highlights were an American tree sparrow I had a close-up view of, a trio of red-necked grebes which randomly started vocalizing, which is something I've never heard them do in the winter before, and just the overall variety of waterfowl and passerines that I was able to find. Overall, my experience at Odiorne Point State Park was quite positive. Going into this, I was a little concerned about using transit to access this birding hotspot, since I had to take 2 different trains and a bus. Had any kind of service interruption impacted either train or the bus I had to take, things could have gotten stressful quickly. Fortunately, that wasn't the case, and both the MBTA and Amtrak trains were reliable, as well as the coast bus. If I had to rank Odiorne Point State Park for how transit accessible it is, I would say that it's feasible for most people to access it without a car, but inconvenient. If you liked this video, consider subscribing to the channel to follow along with this series and see where I go next. You can also check out my previous video where I visited Monhegan Island in Maine.